I'm here at Hiram College in Hiram, Ohio. Welcome, zombies. Let's talk a little bit about Hiram, Ohio, and review some footage and also touch on a few other things as usual while we go throughout this video. Please subscribe and give it a thumbs up and share it so that other people can see these videos as well and see these cool places. And of course, the hypothesis is that there was an advanced civilization here on this continent, also across all the continents, but specifically here on this one that we haven't really been told about. And so we're looking at what still remains, or seemingly still might remain, from said prior civilizations not too long ago and maybe quite a while ago. But the not so long ago part is the most interesting in my opinion. Because why don't we know about it, and who were they, and how'd they do that, how'd they build this stuff? If all they had was apparently an axe, some horses, and some wood wheels and wagons to haul all this rock on. And by the way, I'm making this right in the midst of the lumber prices just through the roof. And that's lumber, that's the twigs that we build with, the twig framing that we build with nowadays. What we're looking at in this video, rock, top to bottom, big stories, lots of square footage, rock. And I've said it before, I'll say it again, you don't build those buildings if you don't know how to, you don't build those buildings if all you have to light and power them with is candlesticks and blocks of lumber. If you're building buildings like that, you know how to do the power, you know how to do the utilities, you know how to run the water, you know how to heat the place, you probably know how to cool the place. And a big piece of it is knowing how to transport the weight of it all. Because apparently it was being transported on wood wheels on dirt roads, which equates to mud. Wood wheels, mud, you can't move a lot of weight in that situation. And yeah, railroads, but even the railroads, you still had to move from point A to point B where the actual building's being built, which sure, maybe in some cases close to the railroad track, but in other cases not. And so even talking about the amount of weight from the track to the location, horse, wood wheel, dirt road, I mean, if you're moving that much rock to create these buildings, you would absolutely pave a road to move back and forth to construct the building. It would be so quick and so easy. If you're putting up this type of rock like that, it would be so quick and so easy to throw down a road. But we don't see that. We don't see roads, we see dirt. What we see is and a bunch of building in the dirt, buried in the dirt. And then we just came and paved on top of it, created our little doorways to enter the buildings, which is really like the tops of these buildings. So we're just entering the little tops of them, which are big tops. And so when you picture the whole building, it's massive. Let's look at Hiram, Ohio. Hiram is a village in Portage County, Ohio. At the end of this little Ohio series, I'll do a video on kind of Portage County as a whole, because pretty much everything I've looked at and shown up until this point, you know, I mentioned there's some other stuff but all the footage I've been getting myself is just from pretty much inside of this county, and man, this county was impressive at one point in our past. It was formed from portions of Hiram Township in the Connecticut West Reserve. The population was 1,400 at the 2010 census, a tiny population. Okay, I did a little different search, Hiram Township, and found a different wiki page. And it says this right here, which is interesting. Hiram Township was named after Hiram I, the biblical king of Tyre. And then also it mentions the Johnson Farm right here, which I did a video on. It's coming up. In my opinion, they make the Johnson Farm look like a old wood barn type of farm, but again, taking into account the floods and all the earth and how buried everything is and a couple other things that I point out in the video, It's not looking much like a barn to me. It's looking more like a castle. Okay, here's a little bit more information I found on it. Again, hard to find a lot of information on this place. When you find enough, there's enough of it to go like, wow, this place was really like there was a lot happening at some point in its past, but there's not a whole lot of information on it. And this is the piece of information in here. Population in 1830, about 500. So again, we're given there's really small populations. Population in 1840, about 1100. And nowadays it's saying it's maybe a little more than double that, but still a couple thousand, so it's just like really small amounts of people. But amazing architecture and really big buildings that were thrown up. That's pretty much all the information I could find on Hiram, the city, the township, the village. But there's also this college there, Hiram College, which is, for a population of 1,000 people, way too much, honestly. It's just like way too much. It doesn't make sense for 1,000 people, and again, talking about how the equipment, the technology that they would have had to build it, just none of it makes sense. But here's what it says about Hiram College. Currently, Hiram College is a private liberal arts college. Okay, and they keep giving like respects, and I guess this place is famous because James A. Garfield, who's the 20th president of the United States, apparently went through there. Served as a college instructor and principal there before he was elected president of the U.S. And driving around seeing all these places, I'd ran into this several times, but I hadn't read anything about it yet. But I had definitely noticed like, oh, they own stuff. So on June 12th, 1849, representatives of the Disciples of Christ voted to establish an academic institution which would later become Hiram College. Okay, so Disciples of Christ, I'll even talk about it maybe a little bit more. Not a whole lot, I don't know much about them, but just noticing that they own a lot, if not all of this stuff. So that's interesting to note. School opened several months later in 1850, and again, they apparently had just in 1849 established it, and later, and it would later become Hiram College. So in 49, they're like, hey, we should do this thing, and then 50, it's open, and this is the building. I mean, that's nutty. And again, I mean, you see this wood fence right here surrounding it? That's what we built. This building was sitting there. We showed up, threw a wood, or whoever showed up claimed it, threw a wood fence around it. And that's what we did wood-wise, work like building-wise, was this wood type of stuff. Now I'll show you all of the other schools right here in Portage County, and honestly, it's just mind-blowing. Like, for the tiny population, and again, the technologies and all that I mentioned, it's just bizarre if they'd actually built all this stuff. So we've got, and it's just mostly all of it's demolished shortly after, just gone. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so I'll show you these real fast. It gives you the name of the city right here, and then it tells you when it was built on some of them, and then it tells you when it was demolished on some of them, or if it, what happened to it. But so like this one right here. Now I get, to some of us that might seem like not an impressive building, but that's actually a really big building. And especially if you consider, again, the time period and what we're told about how they would have built it and the stuff they had to do that. And then also considering how much of this building's buried. That's the top of the building. Like, there's a lot of the building that's buried underneath it. These buildings were a lot taller. It is an impressive building. And like I've mentioned, and I'll show more proof of this as I go throughout, but this white siding, the panels that they just slap on the outside. Look, I'll throw this picture in right here because I literally found, this was on a smaller building, not a building as big as this, but they literally just slapped that siding on top of the actual rock structure that's there. And that rock structure is impressive and solid and has been sitting there for a long time and has survived storms and floods and fires, and it's very impressive building, even though they've dressed it in something that makes it look not as impressive, and they throw up these rinky-dink metal stairs so that we can reach the top of it, and these stairs were never meant to be there in the first place. And if the builders of this did want to build stairs, they would have been beautiful cement, brick, something, rock stairs, very well designed, not some rinky-dink metal stairs. So anyways, just pointing that out. So even that's impressive, but then you've got these guys like this, and built in 1916, demolished in 2004. Like, what? Why would you build something like that? How would you build something like that for such a tiny population? And then why would you demolish it in such a short time later? Look at this thing. buried. And again, the dirt roads, it's just, here's another one with the siding on the outside of it, but again, guaranteed this is a solid rock building. Look at that guy. They demolished that one. This one says it's apparently abandoned and for sale. But look at that. Just a beast of a building. Again, buried. Like, why are you building buried windows into the ground? These steps, like we built those steps into that entrance and threw up the metal rails on it. I don't think those steps were originally there to this spot. This one they built in 1915 apparently and demolished it in 1970. That's a tiny amount of time for a building like this. Built in 1913, gone in 1970. They just needed to demolish a few schools in 1970. Look at this. I wish this picture was clearer, but I don't know, this building looks pretty cool. And very buried. Like, why you don't, not saying when it was built, but it's demolished, and again with the white siding on the outside. Built in 1915 and it's been demolished. This one's gone. Like, look at this. This is just stories buried underneath the ground. I would say this is, so we're looking at, call that 3 stories. At least that's buried. Maybe quite a bit more. Like, this could have been a tall hotel type of thing we were looking at. But nope, it's a school that they built for a population of 1,000 that needed to be demolished 50 years later. Here's another one in 1915, demolished. This one's built in 1919, and it's been, looks like it's been turned into a few different things. Like this stuff, like this is just plaster we've thrown on top of it, and there was, I mean, in my opinion, there was something much more on top here. Towers, I don't know, dome, something. This one's built in 1870. Look at that. It's been demolished. Don't know when this one was built, but it has been demolished. Look at that. Don't know when this one was built, but it's been demolished. By the way, this is all in that same little county. Those last 3 were in the same little village inside of that county. Built in 1913, demolished. Like, look at that. We slapped a tacky sign on it. Compared to how like crispy and perfect everything else is, that's just a tacky sign we threw on it and called it high school. Don't know when it was built, demolished. Here's another one. It's a much more modern image. Built in 1880, gone. Jeez, what a beast. In my opinion, this is the craziest one. Built in 1869, gone not even 100 years later. And look at this. And I stayed in this city for 2 months and talked to several different people, and nobody had any idea that these types of schools, buildings existed in that town back then. Here's another one. Again with the crappy stairs and railing. Here's another one. This one's been, again, stripped quite a bit, I believe. And I bet it had towers or something sitting on top. Here's another one. This one's been demolished. This is number 4, the last 4 here. All in that same little city that I was just talking about. Built in 1914, gone in 91. Look at this one. Apparently that's someone's residence now, or residences, something like that. 1923, gone in 04. Look at this thing. Here's another one. See, that's just we just painted. We just painted on top of it. This one right here, built in 1882. To 83. They said they built this in a year. Here's another just big brick boy. Big solid brick. Cannonballs aren't gonna take that thing down. And this, sheesh, look at this. Yikes. This is all in the same tiny county. In the 1800s, latest 1913, like come on. 1859, wow, look at that. Wow. Wow. Yeah, look at this new building we found. Isn't it cool? Let's get a picture of it in the background. But geez, look at that. That's amazing. What would they say on this one? Built in 59, gone in 1859, gone in 1954. Another high school. It's like I think they've stripped that one and covered it up with, you know, newer stuff. So it doesn't look really anything like it used to. Same with this one. I think they've kind of just done that same thing. But again, you can see buried buildings right here. 1873. See, that's a tall building. And again, what's buried underneath it, very tall building. And back here, maybe that's something like what we built. I would say that's more like, if the story's true about the type of technology and stuff we had in that time period, this is what we built out of lumber. But this is just, again, straight rock. And these dirt roads, there's a wood fence outside of it. You don't build this building and put a little tiny wood fence outside of it. That's a big boy. Built in 1905, gone in 1952. Built in 1884. Our rinky-dink stairs. People are posing with a cool building they just found in the background, or with a cool building they just excavated and touched up. I highly doubt these are the people that built that. They wouldn't have built these metal ramp stairs to get to the top. Yo, this thing, goodness. Whew. Boom. That's like the leftover of a castle. All right, so all of that was in this same tiny county of Portage, Ohio, in the 1800s. And then here's a look at the Garfield Memorial. And remember, Garfield was, when they talk about Hiram College, they basically just only talk about Garfield and how he became a president of the United States. Here's his memorial. Just a wild guess here, but maybe that's part of an actual old castle. Completed in 1890. So here's the plaque that it gives. Founded in 1850 by Disciples of Christ or Campbellites, the institution of higher education was chartered as Hiram College in '67. So all of this was already built. They were done in '67. Okay, so I talked about this in my last video about Nelson Ledges and how it's actually a very old rock wall that's just kind of been destroyed. We can see the wall right here. All that out there, so the horizon line, the trees at the horizon line, that's the trees that have grown on top of the rock wall, the old rock wall. And then right over here, right there, that's actually, this area right here is pretty right close to the Nelson Ledges State Park. But this whole thing, the ledges that they call it, continues on, and this is all of it that we're seeing. And it's literally covering the perimeter of this Hiram College Village, crazy buildings that sit on top of this hill here. And so what I said in the Nelson Ledges video is it looks like we've got like a little kingdom up here with these buildings, very impressive buildings, and then a rock wall out there a ways that's guarding the city. See right here? It wraps all the way around, and then I spin it into this, so you can still see it out there, and then I spin it into this circle here, and all the roads come into this circle, come up to the top of this hill, this square I should say, I guess. I will look at the aerial view in a second. So again, I understand if you have the chance, because what really did this for me the first time was I stayed, it wasn't quite this big, so I'll show the picture of it. This is the place I stayed in, and this was the area it was in, the remnants of this old castle, we'll call it. And when I stayed in this place, I was like, wow, this place feels so good. And it had old stuff in it. And I couldn't really put my finger on it, but I was like, living in this type of a brick home feels different, and it felt better. Then when I walked around that area, I was like, man, this stuff's pretty impressive. And so I understand that you could see this and be like, oh, that's not that impressive. Because we do now currently build stuff that's of that size from like ground level up, but we do it with stick framing, and then maybe on the outside of all the stick framing we'll slap a little bit of rock on just to make it look like some rock was used, but no rock was used. It's all just stick framing. This is not just stick framing. This is an actual rock building that's very old, and it has, again, not to be overly repetitive here, but it has levels buried underneath it, several levels. If you get the chance, go stay in some buildings like this. Find some old brick buildings and stay in them, and I'm pretty sure you'll feel the difference. I thought this house was pretty cool, the Pendleton house. That yellow, that really cream yellow type of color, but with the dark maroon trim on it. And then the golder trim on top of that yellow. This was buried in a little park that they had connected to the school. I don't know what it is, I've honestly have no guesses. And it seemed very buried. It seemed like it was a tower type of thing, and again, this is just a little piece of it sticking up that they've decided to preserve. I thought what they did on this building, so now I've just started to come inside of campus a little bit. So this is the side of one of the buildings, and this brickwork was so cool. So they'd have like the flat wall and have them run horizontal, but then they'd poke every other one actually through. Like, that's just so cool. And the way that looks, like, that's super dope. So here's a closer look at this building that's clearly scorched on the bottom. It's got a tower up at the top, again with that green type of dome up there. It's easy to walk past this and like not really think much about it, but if you stop and think about it, you're like, yeah, I don't know about that. That's kind of weird. So this section right here is just these, I don't know, you could call them benches maybe, but this just looks like old stuff, old building towers poking up, and they're just there still. I don't know. I don't think those are benches that we built there for people to sit on or to put some lights on top of. See, and then if we did build them for benches, like, why are we putting benches inside of the benches? And here's around the other side of the same college library building. You can see it's pretty beat up, it's pretty burnt. You can see like burn marks all the way up to the top of this brick right here. So that's a big fire. Here's the benches again. And you can see how it's just, we wouldn't build it that way. We wouldn't build it slanting into the ground like that. It's just, it was built straight and level like it's supposed to, but new earth has come and laid itself on top of it and buried a lot of it. And that's, I mean, we came in and flattened it probably as best we could or whatever, but that's because we came and paved on top of how it was sitting there. And then a couple, maybe 2 or 3 of the buildings had different names engraven on the outside. And I almost think maybe those names were there originally. Maybe these were engraven later. Maybe this was originally on the building and we figured out who they were or what their names and came up. I don't know, but I don't know. I thought this one was funny. So the big impressive building right here, got the angled triangles and everything. And then, sure, we needed a window inside of the stairs. There's that window again. That doesn't make sense to me. A window under the stairs. And I don't know, the more I see it, the more it just pops out. Like, those stairs and those railings don't match the architecture of the building at all. Like, if you're the builder of that, and those are you'd be pissed if you had to put those stairs in the front of your building. That just, you'd be like, that it ruins. This is probably the best one. Like, I mean, again with the buried windows and whatever in the stairs. And look, we just threw our cement steps. At some point we got our act together enough to make those cement steps and stack them on top of the actual brickwork that's way solid and left over from a long time ago. Right here you can see another sign, another old rock wall, just completely stripped. but we'll leave it there poking up for now. And then it kind of led to this little porch area right here. It kind of reminded me of like a, you know, in ancient temples, they've got those different like rooms or porches with the pillars. Kind of reminded me of something like that. And then these were poking up. I think these are poking up out of the ground. Old something. I don't know what they are. This just reminds me of those benches that we saw. Just more buried. And look, they've dug this up. This has been excavated. I bet if you dig up those benches that we were looking at, you find the same thing in that spot. Boom! That's a good one. I bet you that's super accurate. They've just excavated more of these, and those other ones we were looking at, those are still buried. This is an interesting piece of artwork. I don't really know. When artwork gets this funky, I have a hard time interpreting it. Like, I don't know if this is old, I don't know if it's new. And of course, we've got other buildings in the area just surrounded with white siding, but if you strip that off, we're probably looking at brick, rock, something much more durable and much more solid looking than this white siding disguise that they put on it. And another one across the street. And here's the church that sits right on the corner of the school. It's that chalice with the X cross logo in it, the Disciples of Christ, and this church is impressive. So we've got a Church of Christ sign on there, 1835. So they would have built this, I mean, what kind of timeline are we gonna go with? The typical, they built it in a year or 3 years, or be realistic about it? But either way, 1820s, 1830s is when they built this. Yo, that's crazy talk. The stained glass windows, which we just throw our plastic on top of to protect them. So this one, they left the bottom half of the top of this building exposed, the brick exposed, and then decided to throw the white siding over the top, I don't know, I guess 2/3 or whatever. Saw this real fast. This is probably, again, just older remnants of an older rock wall. They built with so much rock in this area. It's crazy talk to say that they did that in the 1800s with wood wheels on dirt roads.